In 1970, a woman was found dead in Norway. No one knew her name. No one knew where she came from, and every clue left behind only made her identity more impossible to trace. In 1966, two men were discovered on a hillside in Brazil, dressed in suits, lying side by side. On their faces were homemade masks made of lead. In their pocket, a note with instructions no one could explain. In 1922, 6 people were murdered on a remote farm in Germany. Days later, neighbors realized something terrifying. The killer may have stayed in the house after the murders. These are 3 unsolved cases most people have never heard of. Case 1, the Isdal Woman, November 1970. Bergen, Norway. Hikers discovered a woman's body in a remote valley called Isdalen. She had been partially burned. Nearby were 2 bottles, their labels removed, and a pair of rubber boots. The autopsy revealed sleeping pills and carbon monoxide in her system. At first, investigators assumed suicide, but when they examined her belongings, the case changed entirely. She had checked into hotels across Norway using at least 8 different fake names. In her luggage, police found wigs, disguises, and clothing with every single label cut out. Even her fingerprints were filed in no known database. Witnesses who had seen her described contradictory behavior. Some said she seemed nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder. Others said she appeared calm and professional. She spoke multiple languages and paid for everything in cash. Police traced her movements across Europe. She had traveled to Paris, Geneva, and several Scandinavian cities in the weeks before her death. Each time, she used a false identity. Investigators found coded diary entries written in shorthand. They were never fully deciphered. Her dental work suggested Central European origin, but no missing person report matched her description. Advanced DNA testing decades later still couldn't confirm her identity. Some believe she was a spy during the Cold War. Others think she was involved in smuggling or intelligence operations. A few theorized she was fleeing someone. But 50 years later, no one knows who the Isdal Woman was, why she died, or who she was running from. The next case is stranger. Case 2, the lead masks case. August 1966. Vintam Hill, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. 2 electronics technicians, Miguel José Viana and Manuel Pereira da Cruz, told their families they were going out to buy materials for work. 3 days later, their bodies were found on a remote hillside. They were lying flat on their backs, side by side, wearing formal suits and raincoats. There were no signs of struggle, no visible injuries, and no indication of violence. But over each man's eyes was a crude mask made of lead. Next to the bodies, police found a small notebook. Inside was a handwritten note. 1630B at the agreed place. 1830, ingest capsules. After effect, protect metals. Await. Signal mask. That's it. No context. No explanation. Because the bodies weren't discovered immediately, the autopsy was delayed. By the time toxicology tests were conducted, tissue degradation made results inconclusive. Investigators never confirmed what, if anything, the men ingested. Witnesses reported seeing the 2 men earlier that day purchasing raincoats, even though the weather was clear. Another witness claimed to have seen a group of people on the hill that evening, but the report was never verified. Friends and family revealed that both men were interested in spiritualism. They had attended meetings involving alleged contact with extraterrestrial beings. They had experimented with homemade electronic devices they believed could facilitate communication with other dimensions. One theory suggests they were attempting a spiritual ritual and accidentally poisoned themselves. Another suggests they were victims of foul play. What were the capsules? What signal were they waiting for? And why did they die wearing lead masks? The final case is different, because this time, the killer didn't just murder and leave. He may have stayed. Case 3, the Hinterkaifeck Murders, March 31st, 1922. Hinterkaifeck farmstead, Bavaria, Germany. 6 people were killed. But the murders didn't come without warning. Days earlier, Andreas told neighbors he had found footprints in the snow leading from the forest. He also reported hearing footsteps in the attic and finding a strange newspaper on the property that no one in the family had purchased. The previous maid had quit 6 months before, claiming the house was haunted. On the night of the murders, the victims were lured one by one into the barn and killed with a mat. Victoria's 7-year-old daughter, Chizi, survived the initial attack and was found with clumps of her own hair torn out, evidence of her ordeal. 4 days after the murders, neighbors noticed signs of activity at the farm. Smoke rose from the chimney. The animals had been fed. Someone had eaten food from the kitchen. It's believed the killer remained on the property for up to 3 days after the murders. When the bodies were finally discovered, police launched a massive investigation. Over 100 people were questioned. Despite the investigation, no one was ever charged. The farm was demolished in 1923. The skulls of the victims were later lost. 3 cases, 3 mysteries, no answers. The Isdal Woman, who erased her own identity so thoroughly that even modern forensics couldn't bring it back. 2 men on a Brazilian hillside, wearing lead masks, waiting for something that never came. And a family murdered on a remote farm, while their killer may have stayed behind, walking through their home as if it were his own. Which case do you think hides the darkest truth? This is Midnight Files. Subscribe for more unsolved mysteries you've never heard of.